here with Mr. John Fiocco, lawyer of 46 years, barrister, fourth floor chambers, and author of a report commissioned by the government on the building and construction industry into security of payment reform, known as the Fiocco Report. Last month, Minister for Commerce and Industrial Relations, John Quigley MLA, announced that he was quietly determined to introduce these reforms. So the reforms that Mr. Fiocco's, the recommendations that he's made, may soon become law. John, thanks for joining me. Your report confirms, and it's obvious from the way in which the government commissioned the report, that the status quo doesn't presently ensure prompt payment or speed of cash flow. And the nature of the industry is such a high revenue, low margin, that when things go wrong, they really go wrong, as we've seen with some high profile collapses, like I won't name them. What's been the big cause of this?
I think if you are trying to understand the cause, the first thing you have to realise is actually not one cause. There are a myriad of causes. You also have to understand the way in which the construction industry is traditionally structured, which is that you have a principal, a developer or owner, who will enter into a contractual relationship with a head contractor, and the head contractor then will enter into a number of subcontracts with subcontractors.
Yep.
And it's no longer the case now that there will be a head contractor which will employ a whole range of skills and trades that they require in the construction industry. What now happens, and has happened for some time, is that you have a series of subcontractors, because it's a much easier way to employ labour. So when you understand that you have to understand also that money, if it's not flowing through that structure, the people at the bottom of the structure are the ones who are going to be the most vulnerable.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you are looking at why the problem has arisen, as I say, there's not one cause, but you, in a sense, have identified some of them. The head contractor may not be properly capitalised. Then the equity that's used is borrowed, and they're operating on low margins. And the people who then become most vulnerable are the ones at the bottom, at the bottom of the chain. It's also the nature of the industry cyclical. So you're going to have literally good times and bad times. And the question is, well, during that period of time, do the parties involved have sufficient capital resources to survive? Now, when the other problem that I particularly noticed was that subcontractors are not using the legal remedies that were available and are available as much as they should. So what happens is that monies that are owed through invoices that have been sent just go on from week to week, more probably month to month to month. And so if there is a collapse at the top and the administrators come in or the liquidators come in, then there isn't any cash to meet the payments of invoices that have been outstanding for a long time. Whereas those subcontractors could have brought claims a lot earlier. If they're disputed, they could have had them adjudicated much earlier, and there was probably a better chance of getting paid, and that wasn't happening. So part of the problem is the way in which the industry is structured. Part of the problem is the economy, and part of the problem is that the opportunities that are available for enforcement of rights was not being utilised properly.
And there's reference made in your report as a recommendation to include a demerit point system, much like everybody has with their driver's licence, and it sort of looks a bit like 3 strikes and you're out. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Well, look, the one of the issues that arises is the ease within which someone can enter into the building industry. And the means by which they can get registration. I'm sure you've heard that one of the problems is what they call phoenixing. You've heard that expression, which is a problem across other industries, but it can happen in the construction industry. So what happens is that the particular builder is working through a corporate structure, the corporate structure protects them from individually being sued. We all understand that's fairly elementary. But the problem is that they can then close down that company and start up again.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to the registration process, we thought that it was relevant to look at someone's history to decide whether or not they should still continue to participate in the industry despite their record.
Yeah.
I mean, not just necessarily through this inquiry, but in my own experiences as a lawyer, people will come to you and ask you to recover money, and they say, "Oh, that guy's notorious for this sort of thing," So the idea of the demerit system is that people, when they have to come up for registration, renew their registration, the record is looked at, and the system of demerits will determine whether or not they're fit and proper. In the same way that we as lawyers have to be fit and proper to be part of the legal industry, they have to be fit and proper to be part of the building and construction industry.
Yeah.
Now, where it'll go at this stage, I'm not sure, because that'll be something that needs to be supervised and regulated by the actual state regulator. Mm-hmm. In relation to the building commissioner, will have to do that.
Yeah.
We'll see where that goes. That was not one of our central recommendations.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, what we're doing there is we're saying the person who may in fact have control of the cash flow is the party that needs to have a certain amount of integrity about the way in which they operate within the system.
Yeah.
The other reforms more from the perspective of literally protecting the subcontractor, because you are effectively having some control over the capital that is held by the person further up the chain. Yeah.
One of your central recommendations is that statutory trust scheme, which I think is in the East Coast model. Can you tell us a bit more about that and how that's going to protect the guys at the bottom?
Look, it is an East Coast model, but one also has to give credit where credit is due to the former Chief Justice. Yeah. And there was a report done by the Law Reform Commission. Yeah. And it wasn't only the Chief Justice who was part of that. Professor Ralph Simmons was part of that as well. Yeah. So pretty good group of people who looked at this situation, and they had recommended the concept of a trust previously, and which also operate in the United States. Okay. So the way in which it works generally is this way. You start off with the proposition that if a corporation goes into liquidation or into administration, we all understand that effectively the monies that are any monies that are left at that point need to be distributed amongst the creditors. That's after the liquidators and the administrators take their share. By the time that happens, there's nothing left for the subcontractors. And if you look at some of the spectacular failures, we haven't actually mentioned those, but there's no need to. The recovery is very, very low. It's somewhere, I think the stat we had was somewhere around 10 cents in the dollar, and in some cases not at all. Yeah. In fact, not some cases, many cases not at all. Yeah. All right. So the question is, what can you do to deal with the funds at that level that gives some measure of protection? Now, you need to make a distinction between what are called retention monies and what are the progress payments. Now, retention monies are those monies that are held back by a head contractor that are owed ultimately to the subcontractor, but are not paid until the job is over. Let's call it that. Yeah. All right. Now, what we've recommended is, first of all, that there be a trust arrangement in relation to those retention monies, so that hopefully they will be quarantined or isolated for that particular job. Yeah. Because the evidence before us was that retention monies are used, first of all, in some cases they fund other projects. Yeah. People go on overseas holidays using the money. Yeah. Yeah. So it's the money just gets lost.
That'd be great if it came in, because we all saw the footage in the papers, without naming names, of the contractors angrily getting their tools off the sites. And one of the creditors' meetings for one of the high-profile collapses, I remember security had to be brought in to protect the directors, because there were a lot of angry subcontractors at the meeting. Something like that was introduced where they actually couldn't get their hands on the money. It was being held on trust, and they could make a claim towards it.
Yeah. Look, I think I know the incident you're speaking of, and I think that one of the problems there was that they made the wrong decision to prevent the subcontractors take their own property away. It was not. I mean, that was their property, their tools of trade. I'm not sure what was behind that thought. But putting that aside, the concept, and as lawyers we understand the concept, is that the money is held in trust, and that then imposes obligations on the party that is the trustee about the way in which they manage that money and what they can do with the money. Now, one of the things that we had to consider is how that might be set up. I talked about whether or not we do it like we do as lawyers, to have a trust account, one trust account, which then isolates by indicating whose money that is, okay? Or you have to have a series of different trust accounts for each project, if that makes sense. So that's something that will be worked out.
Yeah.
But the idea is that there's an obligation on the party to hold the money in trust, and then when the liquidators come in, or the administrators come in, that money will be identified as monies that are held in trust.
Yeah.
Now, without going into the complexities of trust law, one of the things that we also recognise is probably what's going to happen then is the administrator or the liquidator will become a trustee. Yeah. Because the company's failed, it won't be necessarily automatically. There might have to be an application made.
Yeah.
But then that party becomes a trustee. Now, we anticipate that there will be fees that will be charged by administrators and the liquidators for that. So it doesn't mean that there's going to be 100% protection, because there'll be fees. Yeah,
it's a lot better than 10 cents on the dollar. Though.
No, that's right. That's right. Well, that's the expectation.
Okay, I'm very grateful for your time. I just want to ask you one last question.
Sure.
To the extent there's any subcontractors or people in the construction industry that might be watching this, tips and tricks for ensuring that they can avoid payment delays and can get paid on time.
All right. Well, my biggest message would be that they need to educate themselves about the legal mechanisms and remedies which are available.
Yeah.
Now that's self-serving for a lawyer, but it's not intended to be at all, because one of the clear things that came out in the inquiry was that the level of understanding and education amongst the subcontractors wasn't as good as it should be. Yeah. And it's a good reason for that, because a lot of subcontractors who are effectively what we call tradies, and I don't mean that in any pejorative sense, of course, that they realise that if they're going to make any money in their life, they're probably better off working for themselves. But they don't necessarily take business skills with them. They might be a great bricklayer, they might be a wonderful landscaper, but they don't actually have the business skills and understand.
Yeah. So
one of the first things I would say to a subcontractor that's owed money is not to let it lay that they should in fact do something positive about it. Yeah. And that might involve getting a lawyer to at least write a letter of demand in that situation. Yeah. But if the new system is brought into operation, then they'll be able to give a notice of claim, and that notice of claim will set up a debt liability ultimately in a much more efficient way than it does presently.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Okay. Sorry, you were going to say something.
Well, I was going to say, I don't know if there's any tips or tricks, but I think the real message is understand business practices and have good business practices in your business as well, and don't leave all the focus on the quality of your work. Yeah. You also have to look at the quality of the operation, the management of the operation.
Yeah. That's good advice. Okay, well, thank you very much,
That's right,
Mr. Fiocco. Cheers.
Thanks.